Look, I totally understand. Most television these days is given up on subtlety in terms of their political allegiances. I really wish there could be a return to non-lazy comedy writing and non-political pandering in comedy, but I really don't see that happening anytime soon. Which is also why I don't pay for television anymore. There are very few shows I even bother catching up with through online methods, and many of them are through ways to watch these programs for free. Maybe it's just because I'm a little bit older now, but it seems like all the shows I used to love have turned entirely they've turned into entirely transparent arms of the government. In this case, specifically the Democratic Party, in terms of entertainment. Certainly, the news networks have their bias. That's undeniable, right? And to be clear, I've voted. I've only been able to vote 3 times, and I voted a different party all 3 times. So I don't consider myself allegiant to any one particular political belief. It's just, I think decisions are just too complex to say, well, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican or I'm a Libertarian, because I don't know. I just don't like to be labeled, because people use that against you. And they use that to dismiss your arguments in a lazy fashion. And while I have legitimate beef with many of the politics pushing shows of late night, I want to focus on just one that is, in my opinion, the absolute worst, and that's Jimmy Kimmel Live, featuring garbage human Jimmy Kimmel. Now, I can't critique the man's comedy, as what's funny to one person really may not be funny to somebody else. Comedy can be subjective. I won't critique the man for running ads on his YouTube video monetizing tragedies in the United States. I think people should be paid for their work, and I really don't have a problem with this as long as it's universally enforced. I won't critique his position to morally grandstand, even though the guy made his bones on trash TV like The Man Show. What I want to critique is the man's blatant intellectual dishonesty, his disgusting use of tragedies to push a political agenda, and the use of his quivering upper lip and crocodile tears to influence his audience. To be clear, I have no issue with crying, men crying or women crying. I've cried and continue to memorialize my cats when they pass. I've cried at movies. I cried during The Life Aquatic. That's really not my point. But my point is, Jimmy Kimmel is a professional. It's somebody who spends time rehearsing. It's somebody who spends time crafting his monologue. And I don't believe someone that continues to practice something only happens to then, or will continue to be emotional each and every time they deliver it. This is an act he's putting on. Of this, I am certain. He's crying on command at times, and the way he uses things like Las Vegas, things like his son's need for open heart surgery, the killing of a lion to push his political agendas, is entirely absurd, and I'm sick and tired of it.
Game show is called Guess What's in My Pants. Now, I've stuffed something in my pants, and you're allowed to feel around on the outside of the pants. You have 10 seconds to then guess what is in my pants. You ready?
Set.
Go.
All right. So the first clip I want to look at is what I think is when Jimmy Kimmel finally realized the power of his quivering upper lip and the power it had over his audience. Now, Cecil the lion was a lion that lived in Zimbabwe. It was a medically or a geo-tracked lion that lived on a reserve, and he was killed by a sport hunter, a hunter for sport, a dentist who paid $50,000 to kill a lion. Now, This is not something I would choose to do with $50,000. However, I am not going to judge anyone who decides to spend their money in this fashion. I find it extremely hypocritical that he decides to use his platform that reaches millions of people to dogpile on somebody who does, honestly, what a lot of people around the world do. In fact, it is a major tourist attraction of a lot of these countries. This is big game hunting. Okay. And last I checked, unless I'm incorrect, Jimmy Kimmel is not a vegetarian. So he's okay with millions of cattle and chickens and all these things getting killed in the most inhumane of fashions every year to eat a steak or a burger. But he somehow has a problem with this lion that he had never heard of, he had no connection to, and he probably heard about just that morning. But let's see just how much righteous indignation Mr. Kimmel can muster up to pander to his audience.
The whole dentist who wants a lion's head over the fireplace in his man cave so his douchebag buddies can gather around it and drink scotch and tell him how awesome he is.
So, okay, we can tell your opinion is not great of people that big game hunt. Okay. I don't think that necessarily makes them a douchebag. And to be honest, you don't know anything about their friends. So, I mean, maybe their friends are not a fan of this hobby. As my cat himself just jumps up here. I mean, I don't think anyone would want to hunt Colt. But if they did, now that would be a true douchebag.
If you want to do something, if you want to make this into a positive, you can, sorry.
Are you kidding me? This is, I think, when he started to perfect his crying on command to stir up outrage. And this video was like #1 in trending. It received millions of views. Everyone said he was some sort of American hero because he used this platform that reaches millions of people to call some poor Midwest dentist who maybe was realizing his entire life's goal. Which, look, it's not what I would choose to do, but who am I to judge, okay? I mean, if that's what you want to spend your money on, that's cool. But he decides, hey, it's fashionable to dump on this guy, so let's do that. And while I appreciate him raising money for charity, his conviction is paper thin.
Okay, I'm good. Make a donation, support them at the very least. Maybe we can show the world that not all Americans are like this jackhole here.
So, publicly shaming this guy for something that he paid to do that was legal. Okay, the outrage about this case was not necessarily about the big game hunting for sport, but the fact that this was a tracked lion that had some sort of collar on it. I wasn't there, but my guess is in the moment they didn't see the collar and they made a mistake. Now, I don't think you should hunt lions for sport in general, but that's just me. I don't think it should be illegal. Clearly, this was something that he paid to do. They paid lots of people along the way, paid people in Zimbabwe, people to get him to Zimbabwe. So this is a tourist attraction of these countries that don't have a lot of reasons to visit them if you're a Westerner. Sorry, but that's true. And Mr. Kimmel decides, I'm going to quiver my lip and pretend to cry over something that I probably found out about this morning, and everyone's going to love me for it. And they did. And he cast aspersions on him. Like earlier in his monologue, he said something like, oh, please don't let it be one of us. Please don't let it be an American. Oh, and then I was so sad when it turned out to be an American. Why? Why were you sad, Jimmy Kimmel? Was this your lion? Was this a lion that you had, paid to have the enclosure? Had you spent do you have many fond memories of visiting Cecil the lion? No, I don't think so. This is outrage for outrage's sake and collecting social currency, and it's just complete garbage.
My penis is broken out of its underpants. If we had a charity picnic for retarded kids, there'd be 6 guys.
Looked like she was going for the top.
He said no.
Tells you who said no. He said no. Get in, Jimmy. I'll kill you, you son of a bitch.
So the next step Mr. Kimmel took was one that was, to me, pretty bad. I mean, pretty upsetting. In May of this year, he had a baby boy who was born with a heart defect. Super scary, I imagine. And I'm first and foremost, I'm really happy that everything appeared to have worked out for him. This is a great story, a great moment to appreciate modern medicine. And he comes on to his monologue and shares what can only be described as a harrowing tale for an infant who needed open heart surgery. And he was, I could totally understand being emotional during that time. And he took the time to thank just about everybody by name. He thanked the hospital. He talked about donating money to the children's hospital there. I thought this was great. For 10 minutes out of 13 minutes, it was a great tale, a great monologue. And had it had ended there, very few people would have watched this video. Instead, 11.5 million people on YouTube alone have watched this video. And it is my assertion that this is on purpose. Certainly, if you just had a baby and you had a harrowing tale to have that baby survive, you had to go to different hospitals and what a great story as is. But about 10 minutes into his 13-minute opening monologue, which is quite long, he reveals himself for whom he really is. And I would think, as a father or a mother, you would just be so happy that everything turned out okay for your kid and so thankful, which he clearly was. And that's where it should have stopped, right? The crowd would have cheered. Everyone would have loved his crying, which I assume was real. I mean, maybe. I don't think he's in. I can see, at least understand why you would be upset in his situation. But then, all of a sudden, it's like something washes over him and he remembers, hey, I have to use this social currency to push my political beliefs. And he wastes no time.
President Trump last month proposed a $6 billion cut in funding to the National Institute of Health. And thank God our
just off the top of my head
made a deal last night to not go along with that. They actually increased funding by $2 billion, and I applaud them for doing that.
The healthcare bill has absolutely nothing to do with a millionaire getting the best possible medical care for their child. In fact, if you are at a hospital, you're probably going to get high quality care regardless. They don't check your credit card at the door. Now, we all agree that healthcare is really far too expensive and our system is not perfect. And I don't really know where I fall in on what the best type of system would be. But that's not what this video is about. It's about the clear change that you can see. He's been crying for 10 minutes straight. And then when it comes time to push his ideology, to make his pitch, he's right on point. And then it's almost like he remembers, oh no, I haven't been crying during this, and I have to turn it back on.
Because more than 40% of the people who would have been affected by those cuts to the National Institute of Health are children, and it would have a major impact on a lot of great places, including Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, which is so unbelievably sad to me. We were brought up to believe that we live in the greatest country in the world, but until a few years ago, millions and millions of us had no access to health insurance at all. Before.
Yeah, Obamacare is so great. that it gave everyone free insurance. He's just being intellectually dishonest here. Like, oh, well, the healthcare system now just gives everyone health insurance for free. Look, if you couldn't afford health insurance before, you couldn't afford it under Obamacare. This is such a common misconception.
2014, if you were born with congenital heart disease like my son was, there was a good chance you'd never be able to get health insurance because you had a pre-existing condition. You were born with a pre-existing condition. If your parents didn't have medical insurance, you might not live long enough to even get denied because of a pre-existing condition. If your baby is going to die, and it doesn't have to, it shouldn't matter how much money you make.
Oh my God. So I mean, I don't know how else what better analogy to make here other than Jimmy Kimmel is literally using dead babies to push his political beliefs.
I think that's something that, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or something else, we all agree on that, right? I mean, we do. And I think
Right. I mean,
whatever your party, whatever you believe, whatever you support, we need to make sure that the people who are supposed to represent us, the people who are meeting about this right now in Washington, understand that very clearly. Let's stop with the nonsense. This isn't football. There are no teams. We are the team. It's the United States. Don't let their partisan squabbles divide
just
us on
platitudes,
something
right?
every
don't let their partisan stuff divide us. Just agree with what I think is the best solution. I mean, that's what he's really saying, right?
We need to take care of each other.
This guy's a
I
professional.
saw a lot of families there, and
Oh my
no
God.
parent should ever have to decide if they can afford to save their child's life.
Right. The multimillionaire in the hospital, I'm sure, was just pacing around with gripping the bridge of his nose, just wondering about all the other poor people that couldn't afford to save their baby. And I would challenge you, Jimmy Kimmel, please point out the situations where parents just let their baby die in the hospital because they couldn't afford it. I don't believe that happens.
It just shouldn't happen. Not here.
It doesn't.
So, anyway, thank you for listening.
Okay. Now let's go to probably the spiciest one.
What about the women? Aren't they annoying too?
You're goddamn right they are, Adam.
So now here we are just last week. And I want to be careful about the way I word this because the man, the situation, the tragic events that happened in his hometown. And I can understand why that would upset somebody. And like, it just depends. I mean, everybody's different. If I didn't live there anymore, I don't know how connected I would be. But that's just me. And clearly, Jimmy is on a different plane when it's in terms of how wokeness. And at a time when every time one of these terrible things happen, everybody marches out the same terrible arguments and politicize it just as quickly as possible. And it's sickening. I would have done a video on it, but then I kind of would have been doing exactly what I said everyone else is doing. And so I decided not to do a video on it. But you know what? Mr. Kimmel, not only did he do a video on it, it was monetized by YouTube, even though YouTube said, hey, we don't monetize videos about this sort of thing. And, you know, since he's such a bleeding heart, you know, I'm sure he's not uploading his YouTube videos and creating his thumbnails. I'm sure he doesn't. But maybe he, you know, since he's such a caring guy, like maybe Casey Neistat did. You know, I don't even like Casey Neistat, but at least he came out and said, hey, I'm going to do a video about this, but I'm going to donate all the earnings from this video. Well, YouTube ended up demonetizing his video, of course, but not Jimmy Kimmel's. It's been confirmed that, you know, shows like Jimmy Kimmel, they have an exception. They get to run commercials no matter what. And, you know, I'm curious, Mr. Kimmel, did you donate the AdSense revenue from this video that had 10 million views? I don't think you did. I'd be very surprised. And I think at the very least, you should have demonetized it, in my opinion, because it's just a clip from your show. It's not like you're doing extra work creating a video. It's just somebody slicing up your show and puking it onto YouTube so it gets preferential treatment in the algorithm. But that is neither here nor there. And Mr. Kimmel confirms his garbage human status with yet another waterworks display, immediately followed up by pushing political ideology.
In the aftermath of another terrible, inexplicable, shocking, and painful tragedy, this time in Las Vegas, which happens to be my hometown and Cleto's hometown.
I mean, how long ago did you live there? Do you still live there now? I'm curious.
In his hometown. And as you know, at least 59 people are dead. Hundreds of people were wounded in what they say was the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history, coming about a year and a half after the previous deadliest mass shooting in modern American history in Orlando, where 49 people lost their lives. And of course, we pray for the victims and for their families and friends.
Yeah, thoughts and prayers.
Why,
thoughts and prayers emoji.
There's probably no way to ever know why a human being would do something like this to other human beings who are at a concert, having fun and listening to music. Jason Aldean was on stage. Luke Combs, who was here with us tonight, he played the show too, and obviously no one could have ever expected that something terrible would happen, but it did.
On this, we agree. I don't think that we'll ever really understand what drives somebody to do something like this. And I think we would all agree that we would prefer this not to happen, okay? And as somebody who exercises my right to own a variety of weapons, I am certainly open to the discussion of allowing more regulations to flow through if you can simply prove to me that they will somehow stop people from going insane. This is my position, okay? If you can prove to me that in some way these regulations will stop people from going insane, I will 100% support them. But we don't need to go that far away to Nice, where there was no weapons used. It was a simple rental truck, and it was far deadlier. Or Manchester bombing. No handguns used there either. This is the same as it will always be forever and ever and ever. The Second Amendment is going nowhere, I guarantee it. Okay? Can we work to... I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the answers. But certainly crying on TV, I'm sure this is going to get a lot done.
A person smuggled 17 guns into his hotel room. And
I like how he says smuggled, by the way. He owned them all, from what I could tell, and purchased them legally.
Smashed out the windows, started firing indiscriminately from the 32nd floor into a crowd of 22,000 people across the street. And as a result of that, this morning, we have children without parents. And
I mean, it's like he's delivering the message to the families of, it's like nobody is this connected to something that they had no direct interaction with. He's doing this. This is theater we're watching. Okay? This is why Jimmy Kimmel is a garbage human being. This is political theater.
Fathers without sons, mothers without daughters. We lost 2 police officers. We lost a nurse from Tennessee, a special ed teacher from a local school here in Manhattan Beach. And it's the kind of thing that it makes you want to throw up, or this is terrible, but there's nothing we can do about it. But I disagree with that intensely, because of course there's something we can do about it. There are a lot of things we can do about it, but we don't, which is interesting, because when someone with a beard attacks us, we tap phones, we invoke travel bans, we build walls, we take every possible precaution to make sure it doesn't happen again. But when an American buys a gun and kills other Americans, then there's nothing we can do about that.
See, this is where he's being purposely dishonest again, right? When the Columbine stuff happened, there was plenty of people wanting to do things about gun regulation. When throughout history, every time something that happens, the same debate comes up every time. Okay? The nightclub attack was also, from what I'm told, a legally purchased weapon. The San Bernardino weapons were also legally purchased. The travel ban had nothing to do with those. But he's making that relation to build your emotional connection to what he then wants you to do.
And Second Amendment, I guess, our forefathers wanted us to have AK-47s, is the argument.
So this is well calculated, right? This is the argument that a lot of people make. You know, like, well, when we had the Second Amendment, we only had muskets. Okay, this is true. But the government and our enemies also only had muskets. What good would the Second Amendment do if you could only bear tactically inferior weapons? Okay? I'm not some kind of nut for these things, and I'm not like a doomsdayer, but I'm just saying the spirit of it is so that you can protect yourself against the government, whatever you need to do. So if you're purposely allowing them to have worse weapons, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And nobody was there when that amendment was written, right? So even I can't know exactly what they had in mind. Maybe they really did think, like, boy, this is good for muskets, but one day this is going to be a problem. Maybe. But when people use that, they speak as if they know. Like, well, this is just for muskets. This isn't for AKs. This isn't for AR-15s. Clearly. It's just being disingenuous on purpose. And oh, by the way, Mr. Kimmel, aren't all of your security guards armed? Haven't they been photographed carrying Glocks? If you're so against guns, how come you're beefing up your security with more guns? It's just a curious thing, right? It's almost as if you understand that there's a need to protect yourself, but you are the only one that can have it. Nobody else can have these things, just you, because, you're Jimmy Kimmel.
Orlando, Newtown, Aurora, San Bernardino, every one of these shootings, the murder used automatic or semi-automatic rifles, which are not weapons you use for self-defense.
How do you know that, Jimmy? I have an AK-47. How do you know what I use it for?
They're weapons designed to kill large numbers of people in the shortest possible amount of time. And this guy reportedly had 10 of them in his room, apparently legally. At least some of them were there legally.
All of them were, from what I could tell and what I've heard. And in addition, what is the purpose of having 10? If he had one with an unlimited amount of ammunition, it wouldn't have been any different. But it's just to build your narrative.
Why is that allowed? I don't know why our so-called leaders continue to allow this to happen. Or maybe a better question, why do we continue to let them to allow it to happen? 5 people got shot in Lawrence, Kansas.
How are you going to overthrow a government with no weapons, Jimmy? Is that what you're talking about? Maybe we could write a letter.
Last night, 3 of them died. It didn't even make a blip because this is just a regular part of our lives now.
Except how many people die every single weekend in Chicago. Is that an inconvenient truth to you, Jimmy? Where's your monologue about the killing fields that is downtown Chicago? Or does that not fit your narrative?
And you know what will happen? We'll pray for Las Vegas. Some of us will get motivated. Some of us won't get motivated. Trump is visiting Las Vegas on Wednesday. He spoke this morning. He said he's praying for those who lost their lives. You know, in February, he also signed a bill that made it easier for people with severe mental illness to buy guns legally.
Purposely
Senate Majority
misleading.
Leader Mitch McConnell, the Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, a number of other lawmakers who won't do anything about this because the NRA has their balls in a money clip, also sent their thoughts and their prayers today, which is good. They should be praying. They should be praying for God to forgive them for letting the gun lobby run this country, because it is it's so crazy. Right now, there are loopholes in the law that let people avoid background checks if they buy a gun privately from another party.
Right. That is true. It's not a loophole in the law. There just are private sales the law allows private sales. Why wouldn't it? If I can sell a car or a steamroller or a truck of peace independently, of course I should be allowed to sell my weapons
Buy
too.
them online or at a gun show.
You're supposed to fill it out a form, by the way, too.
So I want to show you something. These are the faces of the senators who, days after the shooting in Orlando,
Shame.
voted against a bill that would have closed
Shame.
those loopholes. These are
Shame.
the 56 senators who didn't want to do anything
Shame.
about that. Now, 90% of Democrats, I'm not talking about politicians here, I'm talking about people, and 77% of Republicans support background checks at gun shows. 89% of
Everyone
Republicans
does.
and Democrats are in favor of restricting gun ownership for the mentally ill. But not this gang. They voted against both of those.
Shame
things.
them.
So,
Right. And how does your solution prevent somebody from acquiring the weapons and then going insane? Because to me, that's clearly what happens. People buy these weapons, well, at least in some of the cases. Maybe people were just out there and then they decided, you know what, I'm going to buy some weapons, I'm going to do some terrible things. I'm sure that happens. But he's deliberately misrepresenting this by saying the only people that do these type of crimes are like, it would have been so easy to spot these people if you just did what I said.
with all due respect, your thoughts and your prayers are insufficient. And by the way, the House of Representatives will be voting on a piece of legislation.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, how convenient.
It's a bill to legalize the sale of silencers for guns. This is what they're working on. We have a major problem.
100% incorrect, Jimmy Kimmel. This has now been plenty of people have debunked this. The sale of silencers are currently legal already in 42 states. The legalize the sale of silencers or suppressors is an incorrect way to frame that. And you know that, Mr. Kimmel. You deliberately lied. Because if you know what day people are voting, you probably know what they're about. They are considering a bill that will remove a federal tax on suppressors, as well as a burdensome acquisition process to obtain one. They aren't going from illegal to legal, Jimmy Kimmel. But, of course, that doesn't fit your narrative, does it, Jimmy Kimmel? He also says things like that the House Speaker, Paul Ryan, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell won't do anything because the NRA has their balls in a money clip. Unfortunately, the reality is that NRA supported legislation revolving around concealed carry reciprocity and has only been stalled because of Ryan. Certainly doesn't seem like somebody's complicit in it. Again, this is the time-old argument, this is the argument we will forever have because we can't go back in time and not invent weapons. It takes somebody to pull that trigger. It takes somebody to get behind the wheel and drive through a crowd of people in a market. It takes somebody to pack some sort of explosive into a duffel bag and take it into a crowd of people. These things are all terrible. And I'm open to discussing some possible way. But at the end, in reality, you can't stop people from doing evil things. It's all fine and well to stand there and beat your chest and quiver your lip, but evil people do evil things, and evil people exist everywhere in society, and they have since the beginning of time, and they will until the end of time. When time ends, it will be because of an evil person. The story should have been the first responders and that group of ragtag bunch of people, 2 security guards and 2 other guys getting into that hotel room. But no, you chose to talk about legislation. And you quivered your lip and you cried. Well, I'm not buying it, Jimmy Kimmel. People who are watching for these things. It just so happens you knew that there was a bill every time. Just so happened. It was just an off-the-cuff, emotional speech, but then you had a perfectly prepared political speech on the back end of it. Continue to use your platform for politics and continue to lose. More people will continue to tune out. Ratings will go down. Advertisers will leave. Your power in the open market will diminish. And those looking out for you in Washington won't care as much about you. Because when people stop listening to you, what power do you have? Maybe focus on being funny.